In this video, we'll be taking a closer look at the Scream movies and how they changed horror forever. We'll explore the subversion of traditional horror movie tropes, the self-awareness and meta-commentary that made the films so engaging, and the impact of the franchise on the horror industry as a whole. In the late 1990s, the horror genre was in a slump. Tired tropes and cliches had rendered the slasher film all but extinct, that is, until the Scream movies burst onto the scene, revitalizing the genre in ways no one could have imagined. With its self-referential humor and meta-commentary on the horror genre, Scream became an instant classic. Audiences were thrilled by the irreverent and self-aware approach, with characters openly discussing horror movie tropes and conventions. This not only added an extra layer of entertainment, but it also elevated horror films beyond their traditional stereotypes. Scream also boasted some of the most graphic violence and gore of its time, pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable in mainstream horror films. Its success paved the way for even more extreme horror movies in the future, but perhaps one of the most significant ways in which the Scream movies changed the horror genre was through its strong, capable female leads. The traditional final girl trope was replaced by characters who were empowered and able to fight back against the killer, surviving until the very end. The Scream franchise was also instrumental in popularizing the idea of horror franchises and the notion of a continuing story arc over multiple films. It paved the way for other successful horror franchises and has become a cultural touchstone for a generation of horror fans. In short, the Scream movies changed the horror genre forever. With their wit, humor, and innovative storytelling, they breathed new life into a genre that was once on life support. Their impact is still felt today and will be for generations to come. The success of the Scream movies not only revitalized the slasher subgenre, but it also paved the way for a new era of horror filmmaking. The meta-commentary and self-referential humor that Scream introduced became a hallmark of modern horror, with films like Cabin in the Woods, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, and Happy Death Day, all following in its footsteps. Happy Death Day, which was released in 2017, is another example of a movie that owes a debt to Scream. Like the earlier film, Happy Death Day is a self-aware horror comedy that uses genre tropes in clever and unexpected ways. The Scream movies also played a significant role in creating a new generation of horror fans. The franchise was especially popular among teenagers and young adults who related to the movie's humor and self-awareness. The success of the Scream movies helped to make horror more mainstream and more socially acceptable, leading to a wider acceptance of the genre among a broader audience. In general, it is difficult to exaggerate the influence that the Scream movies had on the horror genre. The film's use of meta-commentary, self-referential humor, as I said before, and depiction of powerful female protagonists and explicit violence helped usher in a new era of horror filmmaking that persists today. The impact of Scream can be seen in the countless horror movies that pay homage to its tropes or recognize its impact, and it will undoubtedly serve as an inspiration to horror filmmakers for many years to come. One of the most significant ways in which the Scream movies changed horror was by subverting the traditional formula of horror movies. The trope of the final girl, the last surviving female character who usually defeated the killer in the end, was reimagined in Scream as a more proactive and assertive character. Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell, was a resourceful and resilient protagonist who was just as capable of defending herself as the male characters in the film. This subversion of gender roles was a significant step forward for the genre, as it helped to empower female characters and make them more relatable and realistic. The characters in the films were knowledgeable about horror movie tropes and conventions, and the films were often self-referential and self-mocking. This allowed the audience to participate in the film's world and made them feel more engaged with the story. The films also utilized this self-awareness to subvert audience expectations, such as in the first film's famous opening scene where Drew Barrymore's character is killed off in the first few minutes, rather than being the main character. The Scream movies also pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable in horror films, particularly in terms of graphic violence and gore. While the movies were never gratuitous in their depictions of violence, they were still some of the bloodiest and most gruesome horror movies of their time. This helped to further popularize the idea of the splatter film, where gore and violence were a key component of the film's appeal. Finally, the Scream movies were instrumental in popularizing the concept of the horror franchise. While sequels had existed in the horror genre before Scream, the idea of a continuing story arc over multiple films was relatively new. The success of the Scream franchise led to the creation of other popular horror franchises, such as Final Destination, Saw, and Paranormal Activity. In summary, the Scream movies changed horror in numerous ways, from subverting gender roles and traditional formulas to popularizing the concept of the horror franchise. Their impact is still felt in modern horror movies and will continue to influence the genre for years to come. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more content like this. We're always exploring new topics and diving deep into pop culture, so you won't want to miss out on any of our videos. If you have any suggestions for future topics or want to share your thoughts on Scream and its impact on horror, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching and we'll see you in the next video.